Today I'd like to talk about things that remind me of Dad, his values, his personality, how he was as a father, and how he was as a grandfather. Things that remind me of Dad. Irish Spring soap, that was his go-to soap for forever. Wrigley spearmint gum, which he always had at least one pack in his work clothes, and I actually found some in an old leather jacket that he hadn't worn in years. And Motown, especially the Four Tops. Dad's personality. He would tell the corniest dad jokes and crack himself up, and he would repeat the joke and crack himself up as if he was telling it for the first time. Dad was a perfectionist. He was very precise. And you could see that in his handwriting and how he was very deliberate in his and how he wrote. And part of that was him being a perfectionist. The other part was reinforced by penmanship classes and years of Catholic school. It really bothered him as he got older and struggled a bit and couldn't write as well as he used to. He would say he couldn't write. He could write, it just wasn't up to his standards. Dad was very frugal, but he was also very generous. I was aware of the different organizations that he donated to, but what I wasn't aware of was that he would write letters to those organizations and express why he supported their mission. As you probably heard on the video from Eddie Choi, Dad was very protective. He was always protective of his family. And after Eddie spoke, I was reminded of how Dad would give ugly looks to boys, even boys who were just friends who would come by. And then he would joke to me about getting NRA posters and putting them all around the house. Although he never gave Alex, my husband, a dirty look. He always liked him. Dad was determined, and you could see that in the way that he walked. He was a very fast walker. And Scott and I, as kids, had no choice but to keep up with him. He was 6'3", had these long strides, and if we didn't want to get left behind, we just had to keep up. Dad enjoyed music. As I mentioned, I think of Motown reminds me of Dad. And I think I know all the lyrics to all the hit songs by the Four Tops. And as a saxophone player, Dad was partial to wind instruments. He liked Chuck Mangione and Herb Alpert. Dad's values and beliefs. He would say be independent and value yourself, not necessarily always directly. Indirectly, he would sternly say if he thought I was too focused on someone in elementary school who was popular, don't you go following behind that person. And then directly, he would tell me he never cared about what other people thought. He cared about what he thought of himself. And he would encourage me to do the same. And because of that, I never felt the need to succumb to peer pressure. And I never defined myself by external things like a job. Dad valued education. He took a different path. He left Tuskegee after his freshman year, but made sure to complete his education. And he participated on my high school's shared decision-making council. One of the things I remember him advocating for was the formation of a Black student organization. A lot of the parents and teachers pushed back on this as they didn't understand why this was important. And I think Dad was able to advocate from experience, both his and mine, understanding that even though things were different than where he grew up in the segregated South, he knew that California wasn't perfect. We experienced things that were a little more covert and things that we might term as microaggressions. And he understood the importance for Black students to have a welcoming space to discuss concerns of importance to him. And I think he listened to me because I was going through my own awakening in high school about culture and identity. And this was a very important group to me, and I eventually became president of that organization. Because of him and my mom, I always knew I was going to college. One time I joked to Dad, I said, what if I don't go to college? And he very sternly said, well, I guess you'll be getting a job and a new place to live. So I never joked about that again. Dad was great at math, and I had a lot of respect for him helping me with AP calculus. 10 years after high school, I had to do a little bit of calculus for one of my classes, and I can remember what concepts I was working on. And it made me think back to how Dad helped me in high school. He hadn't touched calculus in about 25 years, but he picked it up as if it was just brand new, or just like it was yesterday for him. Over the years, when he worked math problems with us in the kitchen, he would drill into us the different concepts, and it didn't matter what the teacher's expectations were. Dad wanted to make sure we understood the concepts based on his expectations of proficiency. And I've adopted the practice with my own children, which certainly is coming in handy during these challenging times of distance learning. Once online school is done for the day, Carter and Colin know mom school, as my husband calls it, begins. Dad would tell stories about his sports achievements. I heard stories over the year about his sports achievements, and I know he was a great athlete, but the way he told that he was some type of superhuman, unstoppable superhuman. He would say that people said that he jumped so high that he could jump up and change a light bulb. And he insisted he was never sacked when he played quarterback in high school. And when I looked at him a little doubtful, he was very insistent that he was never stopped. He never lost yardage. He might have been hit, he might have been tackled, but he was never stopped for a loss. And he shot hoops so well that he could shoot the lights out. One time he found a bunch of newspaper clippings and shared of his different achievements in sports, and he shared them with me. And by shared, I mean he made me sit there for about 2 hours at a school night and listen to him talk about the glory days. And he always came to Scott and my sporting events, even taking time off work when if he had to do so. I participated in gymnastics when I was younger, and then in high school track and field and basketball, and Scott basketball and some soccer and football. As a grandfather, Dad was typical in that he let his grandkids get away with things that he would never let his children get away with. Dad used to come over our house when the kids were much younger, and one day I found Carter, who was about 3 at the time, playing in a way that I thought was a little bit rough for Dad. And Carter was 3, but the size of a 5 to 6 year old. When I asked Carter not to be so rough, Dad replied, "Oh, that's okay, he's not hurting me." And to me, it looked like Carter was doing a WWE SmackDown on Dad. I reminded Dad at the time when I was 5 years old and I wanted to be picked up because I saw my 1-year-old brother Scott being picked up. And Dad, who was about 35 years old at the time, told me I was too heavy and might have said something about his back. Even as his health became more challenging, he still put forth the effort to come see his grandkids to play sports. During one soccer season when the boys were about 7 and 4, Dad had made it to about 4 of Carter's games and maybe 3 of Colin's. And he had announced that he wouldn't be coming to any more games for this season. And Colin, who apparently had been keeping track of how many games Grandpa went to for Carter and how many he went to for himself, cried and said, "That's not fair. You went to 4 games of Carter's and have only come to 3 of mine." And I joked with Dad and said, "Ooh, you are in trouble." And Dad said he would come. And I said, "No, Dad, we'll just explain to Colin." And there he was next week. Even though he was having challenges with walking, with his mobility, he showed up and came to Colin's game. In closing, the more I understand and accept myself, the more I understand my dad. My dad was an introvert. I am an introvert. He wasn't shy, although I understand he had been shy in his youth. As an introvert, he just had and held dear a close-knit group of friends. And I just want to say, Dad, I know it was difficult as we got older and our roles reversed. Just know that when I pushed back on you, it was because I had so much faith in you and what you could do, and just wanted you to live your best life. I love you.
Thank you, everyone, for attending the funeral today. Anyone who knows me knows that I struggle with funerals in general, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say anything about my father. My father was extremely disciplined, had a great work ethic and passed that along to me. And that's definitely one of the things I'll never forget. Whether we were working on math problems or pounding the basketball, going through drills, it was all about repetition. And he just kept telling me, do it again, do it again. And it was always about trying to be not necessarily the best, but the best that you can be. My dad was also fast. I remember one time I got in trouble for something and ran outside the house, and he was about to chase me. I said, you know what, I'll go back to the house later. I'll just outrun him. And I was in the street, and there were kids down the road, and they saw me running. They're looking like, why is Scott running? And my dad showed up in a RoboCop stature and just took off and started chasing me. And my friends were like, run, Scott, come on, you can beat him, run. And all of a sudden I felt my dad snatched me from my collar and yanked me back. And I'll never forget that. And I proceeded to give me some lashes in the street. They were deserved, I deserved it, but that's one thing I'll never forget. And even with math though, he was just so bright with math, and anytime I would struggle with some of the problems, he would say, Scott, this is easy. It was always easy for him. But one of the things that I'll definitely remember was towards the end of my dad's life, when I would drive up and shave him up in Culver City. And I would drive up from San Diego, and it was just a really good experience, and I knew he loved that. I would get the hot towel, put it around his face, and set him up, and wheel him into the bathroom, put the towel around him, and I would just proceed to shave him. And I knew he loved that. I put the aftershave on him, and I could tell that was very therapeutic for him. But what he doesn't know is that it was equally therapeutic for me as well. So I'm glad you're no longer in pain, Dad. I'm glad you're up in heaven at peace, and I love you very much, and thank you.